So indulgent emotions are emotions that don't serve you in any way. And in fact, they halt, they close doors, right? So an example of an indulgent emotion might be something like confusion. Okay. People will be like, I'm confused. That serves zero purpose in your life. There is no progress you're going to make. All of your doors are going to shut. It doesn't motivate you. It doesn't allow you to move forward. Instead of being confused, which usually comes from a thought, something like, I have no idea how to do this. I'm not sure what I'm doing. Instead, you can think, I'm learning this. I'm going to figure this out. Can you feel the difference between those two? Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Or I don't know how to do this and I'm going to figure it out. Now you're not confused. Now you're on a mission. Welcome to Becoming Tantalum with me, Megan Bonnell. Discover your brightest self in a journey of transformation and resilience. Hey there, my incredible friend. You are listening to Becoming Tantalum, Episode 8, Choosing Your Emotions for a Limitless Life. I'm your host, Megan Bonnell. Today, we're going to dive into a transformative concept that's super close to my heart, the power of changing your emotions. It changed my life. You heard that right. You have the incredible ability to choose your thoughts, which in turn shape your emotions. It's like being the artist of your emotional landscape, and I'm here to hand you the brush. Before we dive into this, I do want to warn you, I wrote a lot of notes on this today because I wanted to make sure that this was done in a really succinct fashion, because this is a concept that's really hard for a lot of people to truly subscribe to, if you will. And so I wanted to make sure that I wrote it in a way that flowed so that you really could understand the power of this, as well as how that can change your life. And of course, how to implement this choosing your emotions. So I want to touch first on our biggest superpower, our ability to purposefully and consciously choose our thoughts. We discussed this last week when we talked about the STEER method, but your thoughts are the seeds of your emotions. So every feeling that you experience is born from a thought that you had, whether you're conscious of it or not. So if you're feeling joyful, that's a thought at work. If you're feeling overwhelmed, you can trace that back to your thoughts. So that means if you want to cultivate a beautiful garden of positive and empowering emotions, you have to start by choosing your thoughts carefully. And the world, just to be clear, doesn't make you feel a certain way. And people don't make you feel a certain way. I think that we've all said that. We've socially grown up understanding that, like, you made me mad or this made me so frustrated. But that simply isn't true. You do. So Eleanor Roosevelt, such an amazing lady. I have done a lot of research on her and she was incredible. But she said that no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. That's just an illustration of that concept. Your thought about it is what makes you feel inferior. That's on you. So ultimately, no matter what, if you aren't loving the way that you're feeling, you need to do the work behind changing your thoughts. And ultimately, you have the ability to do that in any given time. So remember last week, we talked about how your thoughts on a situation is what adds color and emotion to that situation. Situations are completely neutral, but you feel a certain way based on the thoughts that you have about them. So we're going to start out with an example to illustrate this, just in case you didn't hear that episode. And we're going to start out a little rough, but just stay with me because I think one of the best ways to illustrate anything is to do something that's very, very black and white. So I want you to allow yourself to feel however it is that you're going to feel when I talk about 9/11, that horrific, fateful day when we were attacked on our home ground. Everybody with me? I am positive that you are feeling some sort of negative emotion. So it could be that you were feeling unsafe, unsure, scared, mad, angry, whatever it happens to be. But I want to remind you that that situation was neutral. So some people took over control of a plane and it crashed into buildings and into the ground. Neutral. There's no feelings in that, right? But you feel a certain way because of your thoughts that you have on it. You could possibly be thinking about the fact that there were a ton of innocent lives lost. You could be thinking about the malicious intent behind the people. You could be thinking about how scared you were that this happened, in your home country. There's a million thoughts that you could think that all lead to you believing that 9/11 was an absolutely horrific day. But I'd like to offer you something. Not everyone feels that way.
What?
It's true. So the people that organized and executed those attacks are part of bin Laden's, or were part of bin Laden's organization. And to them, they were most likely thrilled, proud, saw it as a necessary message, maybe. But the reason that they think that, or that they feel that, is because their thoughts were probably focused on progress, on the statement they were making, or on the power they demonstrated by the attacks. So they feel one way about what you think was a very clearly horrific situation, but to them, it wasn't that way. So I know that's a rough example, but it clearly demonstrates that situations are very neutral and that our thoughts are what cause us to feel a certain way about them. So we're going to back it down from the dramatics just a little bit, and we're going to focus on situations that are a little closer to home. And to all of those, the same rules apply. Situations are neutral. Your thoughts about them are what cause you to feel a certain way. So you can apply that concept to your relationships, to your job, to your habits, to your weight, really to anything in life. And please know, by the way, that I am not claiming that you should change your thoughts on 9/11. And I'm also not claiming that your thoughts on any situation are wrong. And I'm not trying to dismiss them. That's not it at all. I am only offering that there are multiple ways to think about any situation. There are multiple narratives or stories that you can tell yourself that are also true, and some serve you better than others. So if you want to change the way you're feeling, then you need to dive into the thoughts that are making you feel that way. So when I offer this concept to clients, I like to offer it as if I'm, giving them a whole bunch of options of shoes. Okay. So there are so many thoughts you can think about this situation. And what I want you to do is I want you to try them on, and I want you to see how they feel and see if that's something you can pull off. And if your feelings and the results would change because you changed your shoes or you changed your thought, right? There's different ways to think about that. Imagine how you would feel if you thought about it this way. What do you think about that? And have them pick a different thought, a different pair of shoes that they could also believe, but that serves them better. I absolutely love the quote from Viktor Frankl. He said, "Between stimulus and response, there is space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." So let me define that space for you. He talked about the stimulus. That's the situation. He talked about the response. That's our action. So steer is still applying here. We have a situation. We think about it. That causes us to feel a certain way, and that causes us to act in a certain way. The space is our thoughts and our emotions. So he's saying that in that space is our power to choose. We have a power to choose our thoughts, and we have the power to choose our emotions. And there's an immense freedom in that. And that is what I want for you. I want you to experience that freedom. So the concept that you choose your emotions, that you cause your own emotions, is pivotal in your life. And I remember when I really worked on this for the very, very first time, the results blew my mind. I did work on things that I had always just assumed were facts, right? And beliefs that I had always just allowed to exist in my mind. And I very quickly learned that you can choose to tell a different, also very true story, believable and true, and that new story served me way better, and that I could choose what that story was and choose how I felt and purposefully make myself feel better. So please understand, though, that when you're changing these thought patterns, when you're doing that work, it takes effort and deliberate choice on repeat, like repetition. That's the key here. But eventually, that work is going to become rather routine and effortless to you, so that you're not having to put in so much energy. If you've listened to my previous episodes, I'm a little bit of a science nerd, and I love doing research. And I've done countless hours of research on how our brain functions, because I really do believe that's the most powerful tool that we have. And so there's been research in the field of neuroscience, and they have learned that our brain is capable of something called neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is essentially that your brain can reorganize itself by forming new neural pathways. So it's new connections, and you can do that throughout your life. And that ability to form those new connections, the ability of our brain of having this neuroplasticity underpins the concept that individuals can change their thought patterns and as a result, change their emotional responses. So there was a study that I just read, published in the Journal of Neuroscience, that highlighted how repeated, here's that repetition part, positive thought and positive activity can rewire your brain, that's the neuroplasticity, to make those patterns more predominant. So remember that we talked about your brain having like a primal part of your brain, your survival brain, and then there's your thinking brain, right? So your primal brain is always going to be the one that automatically reacts. We want to change things so repetitively that a pattern is created in that primal, that survival brain, so that you don't have to try to overpower that with your thinking brain, but it just naturally happens. Scientific proof, my friends, neuroplasticity. Okay, so I think that review sets us up really well for today. So today we're going to focus on a concept using the steer process, but instead focusing from or starting from the emotion piece of it. So remember, it's situation, thought, emotion, action, result. So we're going to start from the emotion line. Everything you feel is because of what you think. You make yourself feel a certain way with every thought that you have. No one else. Nothing else does that to you. It's all you. And I'm not saying that to make you feel guilty or shame, but rather to empower you. Because if you are doing that, you have the ability to change it. You have that power of choice. But here's the kicker. And I know we've talked about this before too. The human experience isn't designed to be 100% a joyride. It's a 50-50 experience. Half the time we're riding those good vibes, and then half the time we're facing really uncomfortable emotions head on. And that, my friend, is not just okay, but it's necessary. And embracing that 50-50 nature of our emotional lives is liberating. It means that you understand that not every day is going to be sunshine and rainbows and roses, but not every day is going to be a complete storm either. The beauty lies in being willing to experience all of it with open arms. Being willing to experience any emotion with open arms. When you accept that uncomfortable emotions are just part of the deal, you unlock a whole level of self-confidence that's absolutely unshakable. And I know I just threw that word self-confidence in there, and you're like, where does this come from? So I believe that self-confidence is essentially trusting yourself to be able to handle any emotion that can come your way that you create, no matter what. So it's knowing deep in your core that you can face joy and sadness and delight and fear, any emotion, and you can still move forward and still do what needs to be done. That trust in yourself, that willingness to feel anything, that is self-confidence. And that's where your true power lies. So I love using the example of public speaking. So many people are afraid of public speaking. They might have a fear of what people are going to say, what they're going to think of them, making a fool of themselves, messing up, whatever it happens to be. But you can allow that fear to exist in your body and do it anyway. You also have the ability to allow that fear to exist and then put it on hold and choose a different emotion. I'm going to give you a secret here. Self-confident people don't lack negative emotion. Instead, they're willing to feel it or have the power to pick a different feeling at that time. And they trust themselves to either be able to choose or to be able to feel it and then do what they need to do anyway. That is self-confidence. So you can stand in front of a large group of people, super afraid, and still rock it. You absolutely can do that. And that trust in yourself, that's your self-confidence. Self-confidence also, though, comes from an intimate knowledge that you can tap into any emotion you need at any time. So you truly can just pick them. I'd love to offer you an image of this. So imagine that we're at a party and we walk over to the food station and you see this glorious charcuterie board just full of all kinds of yummies. But I'm going to change it up a bit. I want you to imagine instead of the meats and cheeses and crackers and dips and fruit, instead you have this huge spread of emotions. So there's good emotions and there's bad emotions, and you get to pick whatever emotion it is that you want to indulge in at that moment. And when you master that skill of really being able to pick those emotions and the skill of only having on that board what you want available to you, that is freedom. Now, you need to have some good emotions and you need to have some bad emotions. And then there's going to be indulgent emotions that you're going to leave off the board altogether. We'll get to that in just a little bit. But we want to feel good emotions. So you might be thinking, why is it that I would ever pick a bad emotion? Well, the contrast is important and necessary in life. You want to feel, of course, happy and excited and delighted and all those things. But you also want to feel sad in certain situations, heartbroken, sometimes even angry. And you then can use those emotions to either make progress, get motivated, or to help you process something that had happened. So we want both on our board. We want good emotions and bad emotions. We want 50-50. And let's talk about those indulgent emotions for a moment. So, indulgent emotions are emotions that don't serve you in any way. And in fact, they halt, they close doors, right? So, an example of an indulgent emotion might be something like confusion. Okay. People will be like, I'm confused. That serves zero purpose in your life. There is no progress you're going to make. All of your doors are going to shut. It doesn't motivate you, it doesn't allow you to move forward. Instead of being confused, which usually comes from a thought, something like, I have no idea how to do this. I'm not sure what I'm doing. Instead, you can think, I'm learning this. I'm going to figure this out. Can you feel the difference between those two? Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Or I don't know how to do this and I'm going to figure it out. Now you're not confused. Now you're on a mission, right? Another indulgent emotion might be worry. Serves no purpose. It doesn't need to be on our emotional charcuterie board, right? That doesn't need to be there. And there's a ton of other ones. But the idea being, if you have an emotion that serves no purpose in your life, it doesn't need to be one that you ever choose. So a little bit more science here. There's something called the emotion regulation theory. And I wrote this down so that I could make it super short because it's a lot. So psychological research on emotional regulation suggests that individuals have significant control over their emotions by employing strategies to influence which emotions they have, when they have them, and how they experience and express these emotions. So there's this professor of psychology at Stanford University. His name is James J. Gross, and he has conducted extensive research on this theory. And he's demonstrated that using strategies such as cognitive reappraisal, that's a really fancy way of saying that somebody's going to change their thoughts about a situation. So cognitive reappraisal can effectively alter emotional responses. What? This is exactly what we're talking about. So there's that thought and emotional connection again. So there is scientific proof that these are things that can help you in life, the tools that can help you. So let's get practical. How do you start choosing emotions, right? How do you walk up to that charcuterie board and choose what you want instead of allowing it to just happen to you? First, you have to become a very diligent observer of your thoughts. So notice the narratives, the stories that you're telling yourself daily. Are they serving you or are they holding you back? And do this without judgment, but just curiosity. What is it that my brain is running all day long? And then you need to practice some mindfulness. So when you catch yourself spinning on those negative thought patterns, just pause and take a deep breath and then gently guide yourself towards a thought that more aligns with how you want to feel and the future that you want to have. Remember, it needs to be believable. It has to be true. It's just a different pair of shoes. Okay. Same situation, different story you're telling yourself. And this really isn't about denying the negative, but rather acknowledging it and then deciding to steer your emotional ship in a direction that serves you. Okay. So then when those uncomfortable emotions show up, it's really important that you understand that you don't run. You sit with them. You understand them. Those negative emotions are not your enemies. They're just guides showing you what needs your attention and where your work needs to be done so that you can embrace something or release something. And by being willing to feel any emotion, you open your world up to a limitless amount of possibilities. You stop avoiding certain paths because they might be uncomfortable. You stop missing out on opportunities because they're scary. Your world expands in ways that you never imagined because your self confidence, rooted in the trust of yourself and your willingness to feel, becomes your compass. So, you're going to hear me talking about buffering a lot, and I'm going to insert that here. So, buffering is the act of you doing something so that you're not living in the truth of your moment right then. You're avoiding specific thoughts or feelings, so you cover them up by doing something else, by buffering. So we buffer in a lot of different ways, but we buffer by overworking, overeating, by binge watching Netflix, by scrolling through social media, by filling up our calendar to the max so that we're super busy all the time. But what you're doing is avoiding how you're feeling, which is based on what you're thinking. And so buffering is just covering that up. And I've had a lot of clients tell me, I don't know why I buffer. Like I know what I'm doing to buffer, but I don't know why. Well, I'm going to offer you what I offer them. Give yourself the gift of not buffering, whatever it is that you do to buffer. So stop watching so much TV or stop overeating for 1 week, just 1 week, maybe even 3 days. And I promise you, the reason you're buffering will reveal itself to you real quick. Those emotions and those thoughts that are so uncomfortable that come up, that is why you're buffering. That is where the work needs to be done. That's where you need to start making those changes, those deliberate choices, and do that on repeat. So here's a note about avoiding a negative emotion. I love this illustration. Unless they're indulgent emotions, and like I said, those don't serve us in our life, you need to avoid having them on your tray in any way, shape, or form. But for the negative emotions and us trying to cover it up, think of like a beach ball that's just floating in a pool. It's super calm. It's very peaceful. Nothing's wrong. It's just existing. That could be how negative emotions live in your body. But instead, when we buffer, we take that beach ball and we try to submerge it and keep it underwater. And now all of a sudden, that's a very energy intensive, stressful, violent situation, right? And not only that, but at some point in time, it's going to burst from the surface in a way that you don't want it to, and probably rather unexpectedly. That's what happens when we hold in emotions and we buffer them. Eventually, they're going to burst from the surface, probably not the way that we want them to. We need to just let them exist, just float on the water. Allow their vibrations to fill us, allow them to run their course through us. You're not going to feel that way forever. You can feel any emotion. So, doing that, allowing them to just float, not only allows them to dissipate, but it gives us power because you're choosing to allow them to be there. And there's power in that. There's strength in that. I remember when my dad died, there was just a lot that needed to be taken care of. And I mean, the forefront of my mind, my mom, right? So I needed to help take care of her, make decisions with her, and then kind of be a beacon of light for her. So I had all these negative emotions, obviously the sadness and grief and the things that go along with that. And I held them and I didn't allow them to come to the surface, but they were always kind of nagging there at the back of my mind, right? It took a lot of my effort and a lot of energy to avoid allowing them to be felt. And then when I finally allowed them to be there, that sadness and that grief, and allowed it to run through my body and allowed myself to cry and to just feel this loss, not only did I obviously feel those negative emotions, but I felt in control of it because I allowed them to be there. I didn't buffer. I didn't cover them up. I didn't overwork to avoid them. And there was relief in that. It took a while, obviously, to let them run their course. It always takes a while to process something like that. And at sometimes I chose not to feel it, right? Sometimes I had to work. I had to be productive in life. I had to, function. But when I had this space, I would just continue to let them run their course. And there's still times that I choose to be sad or choose to grieve the loss of my dad, right? My kids never met him. And that's so sad. I want to feel sad about that, right? Or I'll remember some fun times that we did, like I'll go rock climbing and he's not here to join me. And that's sad. I want to feel sad about that. But then I also just as often will choose to feel proud because I know that he would be so happy with something that I've accomplished or something that I'm doing. Or I'll choose to feel joy by remembering a memory of him being silly or funny or doing something that I loved. But both of those, it gives me strength that I allow them both to exist when I choose to feel that way, just allowing them to exist. And it's very peaceful. So let's dive into a practical example that I'm pretty positive you have experienced in your life. So this is going to show you the power of choosing your emotions. Imagine you're stuck in traffic. You've been there, right? It's a long day at work, and all you want to do is get home. And all around you, horns are blaring, people are visibly frustrated, you feel your tension rising. And in that moment, you have a choice. You can succumb to that stress and the frustration and get all pissed off in life, or you can choose a different emotion. So what do you do in that actual situation or any situation? But we're talking about traffic. Step one, you acknowledge the situation. It's a reality. Traffic sucks. You're stuck. It's not ideal. But by accepting the situation exactly as it is, instead of fighting it, you're already taking a first step towards being able to choose that emotion. One of my favorite mentors said, Byron Katie, she's amazing. She said this beautifully. When you argue with reality, you lose, but only 100% of the time. It's so true. Whatever is happening, whatever the situation is, you just have to accept that that is what is happening. And that will allow you to go into step two, identifying your default reaction. So notice that initial reaction that you have. Are you irritated? Are you anxious? Are you pissed? What is it? But recognizing that emotional reaction, that default, but without judgment, just curiosity. What is it that I'm feeling? And then decide how you want to feel. So you might ask yourself, how do I want to feel in this moment? And you might think, I want to feel joy. I recognize that's a stretch, but that's perfect. That's perfect. Because remember, this is about exercising your power to choose how you feel. So you're going to shift your thoughts. To shift from irritation to joy, you have to change by a lot what you're thinking. So instead of focusing on the negatives, I'm not getting home, this is really annoying, I want to go home faster, whatever, you're going to think about something that brings you happiness. Maybe it's a thought of getting home to your pet. I have this little puppy, and every time I walk in the door, her tail is wagging so hard I'm afraid it's going to fly off. And she is just like, her whole world is made by me walking in that door. And it brings me joy thinking about that and seeing that almost puppy little smile on her face. Maybe you could think about the satisfaction of having completed a big project at work, or maybe even just keep it simple and be very grateful for the car that you're driving. Do you love your car? Because that's a luxury that not everybody has, right? So you're going to change your thoughts. The next step is that you're going to engage in actions that support that emotion you chose. So you chose joy, right? Turn on your favorite music. Listen to a podcast that makes you laugh. Call a friend that makes you, happy every time you talk to them using your hands-free device, of course. But these actions reinforce that emotion that you've chosen. Then when it's all said and done, the last step is to reflect. That's really important in anything that you're doing with brain work. So after you're out of traffic, you're acknowledging the difference between your experience when you would have allowed yourself to be frustrated or anxious or whatever it was you would have default felt, to choosing joy. And that reflection is going to reinforce in your brain your ability to choose your emotions in any situation. So by consciously deciding to focus on joy, even in a situation as cruddy as traffic, you're not only improving your mood in that moment, which that's a bonus, but you're also practicing that emotional regulation. And that perfectly illustrates, that traffic example perfectly illustrates that we can't control every aspect of our lives. That's the situation. But we do have the power to control how we react emotionally. Choosing our emotions wisely opens up a world of possibilities of experiencing life in a more positive, fulfilling way. And the work you put into choosing your emotions and allowing those negative emotions to exist, because remember that human experience, it's 50-50. That is what's going to allow you to live your life, to change your life, and to gain that self-confidence and trust in yourself more than you ever could possibly imagine. If you're part of the Tantalum tribe, your work this week is going to be focused on choosing emotions, sorting emotions, allowing them to exist, tying them back to your thoughts so that you can work through this and apply it to your own life. It's such amazing work. If you're not part of the tribe, that's an amazing monthly coaching program that we take all these concepts that we learn to a much deeper level and we apply them to our life and so much more. There's live coaching and there's courses. You don't want to miss it. So if you want to join, I highly suggest it. Go to tantalumcoaching.com and join. My fabulous friend, as we're wrapping up today's journey, I want you to remember this. You are powerful beyond measure. Your ability to choose your thoughts and your emotions really is a superpower, and you have it within you already. You can embrace this 50-50 life that we have, welcoming all emotions as a part of your human experience, and just watch as your world transforms. Trust in yourself. Be willing to feel everything and step into this limitless life that's waiting for you. Thank you for tuning in to Becoming Tantalum. I can't wait to see where this journey leads you next as you apply all of these tools that you're learning. You've got this. I'm in your corner. You can always reach out for help. Next week, we're going to be talking about the very possible task of changing your past. So if you have any situations or regrets or memories that are really holding you prisoner and not allowing you to move forward in your current life, then we're going to be working on changing your past so you can create the future that you want. Until next time, keep choosing your emotions deliberately and purposefully and creating a life that's uniquely and wonderfully yours. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like it, subscribe, and share. My goal is to help everyone transform their life and empower them to create the life of their dreams. We all have it in us.
An ironic media production. Visit us at ironickmedia.com.